Imagine the sheer volume of paper that crosses the threshold of the White House each day: policy briefs, legislative proposals, pleas for aid, pronouncements of praise, and screeds of outrage. A daily deluge, a relentless tide of ink and intention washing over the West Wing. It was within this very flood of correspondence, amidst the expected and the mundane, that a single envelope arrived, seemingly unremarkable in its official government-issued white. Outwardly, it was just another piece of mail. But to those discerning eyes within the president's inner circle, to those attuned to the subtle tremors in the machinery of power, this particular letter hummed with an almost imperceptible, yet undeniably electric energy. It wasn't the weight of the envelope, nor any ostentatious markings that betrayed its unusual nature. It was something far more subtle, far more compelling. An almost palpable sense of quiet urgency radiating from the crisp, cream-colored paper itself. This wasn't the predictable missive from a senator flexing political muscle, a well-placed lobbyist angling for influence, or even a decorated four-star general accustomed to commanding attention. This letter originated from a far more unexpected source, a name that initially sparked no immediate recognition, yet resonated with an undeniable undercurrent of intrigue. Emma Caldwell, Navy captain. The rank itself, while respectable, wasn't what caused the ripple of unease and curiosity within the White House staff. It was the appended age, stark and uncompromisingly precise. 28 years old. 28. That single number, whispered in hushed tones through the West Wing offices, hung in the air like a question mark, defying easy categorization, unsettling established norms. Captains that young weren't just rare. They were the stuff of naval legend, whispered anomalies in the vast, echoing chambers of maritime tradition, figures spoken of in hushed tones, more myth than reality. And for such a junior officer, a captain barely out of her 20s, to directly, audaciously petition the President of the United States for a private, unscheduled audience in the Oval Office? That was not merely unusual. That was, in the carefully calibrated world of Washington power, utterly, breathtakingly unprecedented. The request itself, bold in its simplicity, bypassed layers of protocol, ignored established channels, and cut straight to the heart of the matter with a message both stark and undeniably urgent. "Mr. President," the letter declared, the words typed with an almost defiant directness, "I have something important to discuss, not for myself, but for those who serve in silence." When the letter landed squarely on President Donald Trump's polished mahogany desk, amidst the expected stack of daily briefings and pronouncements, his initial reaction was, characteristically, a flicker of mild, almost dismissive curiosity. His gaze, sharp and accustomed to sweeping pronouncements and bold headlines, initially registered the official White House stationery, the crisp, formal address. Another request for his time, another demand on his already overstretched attention. But as he scanned the opening lines, a subtle shift occurred, a flicker of something more than mere politeness, more than cursory acknowledgement. The directness of the language, the almost defiant simplicity of the request, sparked a nascent intrigue in the president's ever-calculating mind. Accustomed to the gravity of generals, the unwavering resolve etched onto the faces of admirals, the carefully calibrated pronouncements of seasoned military strategists, Trump was no stranger to the somber cadence of duty, the weight of command. He recognized the inherent seriousness in the letter's tone, the unmistakable undercurrent of professional bearing. Yet, beneath the veneer of military formality, he sensed something profoundly different. This wasn't a request for funding, a strategic proposal, or a political endorsement. This was something far more personal, far more enigmatic. Leaning back in his high-backed leather chair, the supple material creaking softly under his weight, Trump reread the brief, potent message, his brow furrowing slightly in contemplation. The crisp paper of the letter, stark and white against the rich, dark wood of his desk, seemed to amplify the weight of the words it so economically contained. "Captain Caldwell," he murmured, the name rolling off his tongue, more amusing aloud than a direct question. His gaze drifting upwards, as if seeking answers from the ornate ceiling of the Oval Office itself. He raised a questioning eyebrow towards his assembled aides, a silent directive hanging in the air. "Who is this Captain Caldwell?" As if on cue, anticipating the president's every unspoken query. A seasoned advisor, ever prepared and impeccably efficient, stepped forward, a slim, crisp folder already in hand. With practiced ease, he produced the requested file, the snap of the folder opening echoing in the otherwise silent room. "Emma Caldwell, sir," the advisor stated, his voice measured, professional, yet betraying a hint of the same intrigue that had sparked in the president's eyes. 28 years old. Naval Academy valedictorian, sir. He paused for emphasis, allowing the weight of that distinction to register. Commissioned as an officer at 22, fast-tracked through the ranks, promoted to captain at just 26 years of age. The youngest captain in modern naval history, Mr. President. Trump nodded slowly, the initial flicker of curiosity now fully ignited into a spark of genuine intrigue. He leaned forward, his gaze sharpening, demanding more. And her record? Beyond the accelerated promotions, beyond the youthful audacity, what has she done? The advisor, anticipating the inevitable follow-up, continued, his tone now laced with a careful nuance. "Impeccable, sir. Multiple successful operations, classified commendations for exemplary leadership in high-pressure situations. A strategic mind, sir, highly respected by her superiors." But the advisor's voice dropped almost imperceptibly, a shadow crossing his usually impassive features. "There's also a shadow, Mr. President, a mission from 3 years ago. A critical command decision made in the field resulted in casualties." The advisor's voice trailed off, the unspoken weight of command, the inherent cost of leadership, hanging heavy in the air, thick with implication. Trump's gaze sharpened further, his mind already piecing together the fragments of information, the whispers of praise, the hint of controversy, the sheer audacity of the request itself. He'd met countless military leaders in his time in office, men and women forged in the unforgiving crucible of conflict, their faces etched with the lines of command, their eyes reflecting the weight of decisions made and lives irrevocably altered. But this Captain Caldwell, this was different. A request at this level from someone so young, so seemingly untouched by the usual political machinery, yet bearing the unspoken weight of a shadowed past. That shadow, that veiled reference to a mission gone wrong, added an unexpected layer of human complexity, a dimension rarely encountered in the carefully orchestrated, often sanitized world of power. The mystery, the potential for revelation was suddenly compelling. "Let's hear what she has to say," he declared, the abruptness of his tone masking a burgeoning curiosity that now bordered on outright fascination. The decision, once made, was swift, decisive, characteristic of his leadership style. "Set up the meeting. Today." Within hours, arrangements were finalized, the unprecedented audience with the young Navy captain meticulously set in motion, shrouded in an unusual, almost conspiratorial degree of secrecy. But in Washington, the very heart of the rumor mill, secrets, especially those whispered in the hallowed halls of power, are as elusive as smoke, as transient as whispers carried on the wind. News, or rather, the hint of news, the tantalizing scent of a story breaking, that a mere 28-year-old Navy captain had somehow managed to secure a private meeting with the President of the United States, inevitably leaked. And the country, ever hungry for authentic narrative, ever starved for a story that transcended the usual political din, took immediate, rapturous notice. The internet, predictably, ignited, a digital wildfire of theories and speculation, fueled by conjecture, innuendo, and the irresistible allure of the unknown. The internet predictably detonated. Once the first whispers of a clandestine meeting between a 28-year-old Navy captain and the President of the United States escaped the confines of the White House, the digital world erupted in a frenzy of speculation. Social media platforms became battlegrounds for theories, wild and often contradictory, ranging from secret missions and national security crises to whispered rumors of political opportunism and even, inevitably, romantic intrigue. Every online news outlet, from established giants to fledgling blogs, scrambled for a piece of the narrative, dissecting every available detail, no matter how scant, fueling the insatiable public hunger for answers, for explanations, for a story that transcended the usual political humdrum. Emma Caldwell, however, remained utterly detached from the escalating digital frenzy. Secluded in her Washington hotel room, preparing for the monumental task ahead, she was blissfully, or perhaps deliberately, oblivious to the online firestorm raging in her name. Doubt, speculation, public scrutiny. These were not new adversaries for Captain Caldwell. She had, in many ways, been battling the undertow of lowered expectations, the subtle currents of doubt, her entire life. From the moment she'd made the unconventional, and for some unfathomable decision to join the Navy at the tender age of 18, she'd faced a quiet chorus of doubters, their skepticism often veiled, yet always present. A woman in command? A young woman at that? The unspoken questions, the subtle condescension, had followed her like a shadow. Becoming an officer at 22, a meteoric rise through the ranks that defied conventional wisdom, had only amplified the whispers. Whispers of nepotism, of unearned privilege, of a fast track paved by connections rather than competence. And when she assumed command at the impossibly young age of 26, the murmurs intensified, morphing into open pronouncements of disbelief, thinly veiled criticisms cloaked in concerned pronouncements. Too young, they declared with knowing certainty. Too green, in over her head, bound to falter. But Emma Caldwell had consistently, resolutely, silenced the doubters not with grand pronouncements or public rebuttals, but with quiet, unwavering competence. With each successfully executed mission, with each commendation earned, with each carefully calculated risk that yielded strategic advantage, she had chipped away at the wall of skepticism, brick by painstaking brick, forging her own path through the rigid structures of naval tradition. And now, facing the most daunting challenge of her young career, she drew strength from that wellspring of hard-won resilience, that ingrained ability to weather the storm, to remain focused on the task at hand, impervious to the external noise. Now, she was given a platform, an unprecedented opportunity to address not just her superiors, not just the military establishment, but the entire nation. Yet, this wasn't about personal accolades, about basking in the fleeting glow of public attention. Emma Caldwell harbored no such ambitions, craved no such fleeting validation. This wasn't about political maneuvering, about leveraging public opinion for personal gain. She was a soldier, not a politician, a warrior, not a strategist in the cynical game of power. This was about something far larger, far more profound than herself. This was about truth, a raw, unflinching truth she felt compelled to speak, not to advance her own career, not to seek recognition, but to give voice to the voiceless, to break the silence for the countless others who had given more, sacrificed more, and silently borne burdens far heavier than she ever could. The military jet carrying Emma Caldwell kissed the rain-slicked tarmac at Joint Base Andrews with a gentle, almost mournful sigh, the gray morning sky above mirroring the somber weight settling in her heart. As the aircraft door hissed open and the boarding stairs were extended, a gust of chill wind whipped across the runway, tugging at the edges of her crisp Navy uniform, a physical manifestation of the unease swirling within her. Stepping onto the rain-slicked concrete, she felt it immediately, that phantom weight of unseen eyes, the subtle, yet undeniable pressure of a nation's collective expectation bearing down upon her. The press, despite official White House denials and carefully crafted pronouncements of no scheduled events, had, with their uncanny, almost preternatural sense for a developing story, caught the scent of something significant brewing. Like a pack of hounds on a scent trail, they had somehow managed to breach the carefully guarded perimeter of the airbase. A phalanx of reporters and camera crews clustered beyond the security fence, lenses glinting like predatory eyes in the overcast morning light. Their questions, sharp, probing, speculative. A barrage of sound and shouted inquiries began swirling around her even before she reached the waiting vehicle, a chaotic vortex of journalistic fervor. Captain Caldwell, what's the purpose of this meeting with the President? Captain, are you here to discuss a new military initiative? Captain Caldwell, are you concerned about the controversy surrounding your past missions? Emma offered nothing. No soundbite, No carefully crafted statement designed to deflect or appease. No acknowledgement of the media frenzy swirling around her. Her expression remained neutral, carefully schooled, a mask of practiced composure that betrayed nothing of the turmoil churning beneath the surface. Years of rigorous naval training, countless hours spent honing her mental discipline, had etched this unwavering stoicism into her very being. Maintain absolute control under pressure, betray no emotion, hold steady, ramrod straight, when the world is watching, scrutinizing, dissecting every nuance of your behavior. But beneath the starched, impeccable uniform, beneath the carefully constructed facade of unwavering calm, her heart hammered a frantic, almost rebellious rhythm against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against her carefully constructed calm. This wasn't just another routine briefing at the Pentagon. This wasn't a sterile, impersonal command center, another scheduled meeting in a long line of official engagements. This was different. This was a precipice, a point of no return. This was her moment of truth. As the black sedan carrying her towards the White House pulled away from the airbase and merged onto the rain-slicked highway, Emma's gaze drifted out the window, the gray landscape blurring past in a muted rush. But her mind, refusing to be distracted by the external world, remained fiercely, intensely focused inward, replaying the weight of the task ahead, steeling herself for the storm she knew she was about to unleash. As the black sedan carrying Emma Caldwell approached the iconic White House gates, the wrought iron gleaming black and imposing against the somber gray sky, a sudden, unexpected wave of memories washed over her, stark and visceral, flooding her senses with an almost overwhelming intensity. Unbidden, unprompted, her mind conjured a kaleidoscope of fragmented images, a lifetime of service compressed into a series of fleeting, yet indelible moments. The faces of fallen comrades, young men and women full of life, now frozen forever in time, their smiles replaced by the stark, unyielding stillness of death. The hollow-eyed, grief-stricken faces of families receiving the carefully folded flags, the crisp triangles of fabric heavy with unspoken sorrow and shattered dreams, the echoing silence of flag-draped coffins being carried in solemn procession, stark against the vibrant green of Arlington National Cemetery. Each footstep a muffled drumbeat of loss and remembrance. The sterile, antiseptic light of field hospitals, the hushed whispers of medical personnel battling to save lives, the raw, visceral sounds of pain and suffering echoing in the sterile air, the weight of unspoken grief, the burden of shared trauma, the countless sacrifices witnessed in the harsh glare of battlefield realities and the quiet, agonizing solitude of loss. A lump formed in her throat, constricting her breathing, threatening to shatter the carefully constructed composure she had so painstakingly cultivated. This wasn't just a building, she realized with a sudden, almost visceral clarity. This wasn't merely a symbol of American power, a monument to political might. Stepping through those imposing gates, passing beneath the watchful eyes of history, was like crossing a threshold into hallowed ground, entering a space imbued with the weight of countless decisions, the echoes of countless lives irrevocably shaped within its walls. She wasn't here for a photo op, for a fleeting moment in the spotlight, for the hollow praise of politicians seeking to capitalize on her story. She wasn't driven by personal ambition or political aspiration. She was here because someone had to speak. Someone had to break the silence. Someone had to bear witness to the unspoken sacrifices, the invisible wounds, the crushing weight of command that too often went unseen, unheard, unacknowledged in the triumphant narratives of military victory and national pride. The black sedan glided to a smooth stop before the West Wing entrance, and Emma, drawing upon years of ingrained discipline, forced down the rising tide of emotion, consciously compartmentalizing the memories, locking them away in the steel vault of her mind. Stepping out of the vehicle, she walked with measured, purposeful strides towards the iconic Oval Office, the weight of her mission settling upon her shoulders like a physical burden, both terrifying and strangely empowering. Stepping into the Oval Office was like crossing another threshold, entering a space both grand and strangely intimate, a room that whispered of power, of history, of decisions that had shaped the course of nations. The sheer volume of the room was initially imposing, the high ceilings and expansive windows lending an air of almost cathedral-like grandeur. Yet, despite its scale, the Oval Office possessed a surprising sense of intimacy, a feeling of being enclosed, cocooned within the very heart of American power. Portraits of past presidents, stern-faced and resolute, yet somehow also strangely vulnerable, lined the walls, silent witnesses to the countless dramas, the triumphs and tragedies, the weight of human fallibility and the enduring strength of American resolve that had played out within these very walls. The rich, warm scent of old wood, polished to a gleaming sheen, and the subtle, clean fragrance of lemon polish hung heavy in the air, a constant, almost subliminal reminder that this was hallowed ground, a place where destinies were shaped, where choices echoed across continents, across generations, across the vast, interconnected web of human history. President Trump, a figure of imposing presence, yet strangely still in this moment, stood near his massive, resolute desk, hands clasped loosely in his pockets, watching her approach with an expression that was, for him, unusually complex, a carefully calibrated tapestry of curiosity, shrewd assessment, and perhaps, beneath the layers of presidential persona, a flicker of something akin to genuine respect. "Captain Caldwell," he greeted her, his voice steady, devoid of the bombast and theatricality that often characterized his public pronouncements, surprisingly subdued, almost contemplative. "I've met generals, admirals, world leaders, kings and queens, dictators and diplomats. But a 28-year-old Navy captain sitting across from me in the Oval Office? That's something you don't see every day." His words, though seemingly casual, were imbued with a subtle weight, a hint of the genuine intrigue that had drawn him to summon this young, relatively unknown officer to the highest seat of power in the nation. Emma met his gaze directly, her own unwavering, her spine ramrod straight, every muscle in her body consciously engaged, years of ingrained military discipline taking over, pushing back the rising tide of nerves, anchoring her to the present moment, to the monumental task at hand. "Mr. President," she responded, her voice clear, resonant, betraying none of the inner turmoil, the frantic drumbeat of anxiety thrumming beneath her carefully constructed composure. "Thank you, sir. Thank you for meeting with me." He gestured towards the plush, leather-upholstered chair positioned in front of his desk, a silent, almost imperceptible invitation to relax, to bridge the vast chasm of rank and power that separated them, to step into the intimate and potentially volatile space of direct, unfiltered conversation. "Your letter, Captain," he began, his voice thoughtful, his gaze unwavering. "It got my attention. I'll admit that. You said this wasn't for you, but for those who serve in silence. Tell me, Captain Caldwell, what does that truly mean?" Emma sat, her movements precise, economical, settling into the offered chair with a quiet grace that belied the storm raging within. She steadied herself, consciously slowing her breathing, grounding herself in the present moment, bracing for the most crucial, most consequential moment of her young career. This was it, the single, fleeting chance to make her voice heard, to make her words count, to make this improbable meeting matter. She wouldn't squander it. She wouldn't falter. She wouldn't flinch. The silence, she knew, was about to break. The White House press room had fallen into a stunned, almost reverent silence when Emma finished speaking, her voice echoing in the sudden stillness. For several seconds, there was no sound, no shuffling of papers, no whispered questions from the assembled reporters, just a profound, palpable silence. Then, the dam broke, the questions erupting all at once, a cacophony of voices clamoring for answers, for clarification, for a piece of the narrative that had just been unveiled. "Captain Caldwell, do you believe the military is failing its soldiers? Are you saying that current leadership isn't doing enough to support our troops? What do you say to critics who claim you're being used as a political tool, a convenient prop for the president's agenda?" Emma held up a hand, signaling for quiet, her voice calm, authoritative, cutting through the chaotic noise. "This isn't about politics," she stated firmly, her gaze sweeping across the room, silencing the clamoring voices. "It never was. It never will be. This is about leadership. Real leadership. The kind that doesn't hide from hard truths. The kind that doesn't shy away from uncomfortable conversations. The kind that prioritizes people over protocols, compassion over commendations. She glanced briefly at Trump, who stood nearby, a silent observer, watching her with an expression she still couldn't quite decipher. Approval? Curiosity? Perhaps a complex mixture of both. You asked me to speak for those who serve in silence, Mr. President, she continued, her voice resonating with quiet strength, her gaze unwavering. And I did. I have. Now, she said, her voice leaving no room for doubt, no room for evasion. It's up to the rest of you, leaders, policymakers, the media. It's up to all of you to decide whether you're going to listen, whether you're going to truly hear what's been said here today, whether you're finally ready to act. With that, Emma stepped away from the podium, her mission complete, her truth delivered. As she exited the room, the deafening sound of cameras clicking, capturing the indelible moment, filled the air, a visual echo of the words that would dominate news cycles and resonate in the hearts of a nation for weeks to come. The reactions, as predicted, were immediate, passionate, and fiercely divided. Some hailed Emma as a hero, a modern-day Joan of Arc in uniform, a courageous voice of truth speaking to power. Emma, however, remained untouched by the accolades, unmoved by the criticism. She hadn't expected her speech to change everything overnight. She was a realist, a soldier, intimately familiar with the slow, grinding gears of institutional change. She knew there would be resistance, entrenched opposition, ingrained inertia. She knew there would be people, both inside and outside of the military establishment, who would dismiss her words, who would minimize her experience, who would say she was too young, too inexperienced, too emotional to understand the complexities of command, the brutal realities of war. But she also knew something else, something far more profound, far more enduring. For the first time, soldiers who had spent years suffering in silence were speaking up, sharing their stories, breaking the chains of unspoken grief. For the first time, leadership at the highest levels of command was being questioned, not in a way that disrespected authority, but in a way that demanded accountability, that prioritized human cost over political expediency. For the first time, the crushing weight she had carried for so long, the ghost of Jake, the burden of unspoken grief, felt just a little lighter. And in the vast, echoing silence of her own heart, that, finally, was enough. Before she left Washington, Emma made one last solitary stop. Arlington National Cemetery. She walked slowly between the endless rows of pristine white gravestones, a silent city of the fallen, a hallowed ground of sacrifice, until she found the one she was looking for. Jake Carter. She knelt before the simple stone, placing a hand gently on the cool marble, tracing the engraved letters of his name with her fingertips. "I spoke for you, Jake," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves, the distant murmur of traffic, the quiet whispers of the wind. And they listened. The wind rustled the grass around her, a gentle sigh that seemed to carry the sound of distant footsteps, the murmur of quiet voices, the echoes of lives lived and lost. Somewhere deep inside, in a place she hadn't accessed in years, in a corner of her heart she thought had been irrevocably broken. For the first time in 3 long, agonizing years, Emma Caldwell, Navy captain, warrior, and woman, felt like she could finally breathe. She stood, straightened her crisp uniform, the weight of responsibility now a familiar, almost comforting burden, and gave one final, crisp salute, a silent farewell, a whispered promise. Mission accomplished, Jake. Then, turning her back on the silent rows of gravestones, she walked away, not as someone still carrying the crippling weight of her past, but as someone finally, resolutely, ready to shape the future. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more inspiring content. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.